Thank you very much for attending this talk. I'm Dominique Pastor, and this paper is a joint work with Erwan Bourrier, our former PhD student who defended his thesis 1 month ago, André Rossmann, who is a mathematician worldwide known for her contribution to category theory, and Roger Waldeck, my favorite economist. Well, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present this work during this workshop, in as much as our scope may seem a bit exotic in comparison with others. Indeed, I'm going to address mathematical models of resilience. Well, without too much mathematics and by appealing to your intuition instead. So first question, what's the connection with sparsity? Well, in fact, this work is a constant momentum towards more and more parsimony in Occam's razor sense, and thus it basically stems from sparsity and different ways to relax sparsity hypothesis. Let's explain. Since Donau's seminal work in 1994, we can significantly reduce our prior knowledge on signals of interest to estimate them. Hence, by taking into account that most of the wavelet coefficients of this image are small and that only a few of them have significant amplitude, we can perform a non-parametric estimation of this noisy image by soft thresholding. It turns out that standard sparsity can further be relaxed to obtain the following weak sparse model, initially dedicated to statistical detection and not to estimation. In this model, we suppose that the observation Y is either noise alone or some signal theta with a non-distribution in independent noise. In this model, we assume further the existence of an unknown probability of occurrence less than or equal to 1/2. And we also suppose that the signal amplitude is bounded away from 0. We can prove the existence of a hard thresholding test to decide on the presence or the absence of the signal with a probability of error that has tight bounds to the left and to the right. And if we use this threshold to perform soft thresholding of a noisy image, we obtain this result, which is actually an improvement in comparison with standard soft thresholding. The reason is that the weak model of sparsity better captures the behavior of the signal wavelet coefficients. But in practice, signal amplitudes are not necessarily bounded away from 0. Thence the idea to change the model by considering that detecting a signal of interest is in fact detecting that this signal has drifted away from 0 by too much. So we further relax sparsity assumptions by actually discarding any prior knowledge on the signal and its probability of occurrence. And for this problem, there exists an optimal hard thresholding test, hereafter called the RDT test, RDT for random distortion testing. In this talk, I don't need to specify further the threshold here and the criterion this thresholding test optimizes. What must be kept in mind at this stage is that the RDT test can actually be used to detect the presence or the absence of the signal without requiring sparsity assumptions. Well, in engineering, we generally endeavor to devise robust and optimal solutions. But are robustness and optimality necessary and even desirable after all? For instance, isn't it reasonable to think that sustainability of biological systems mainly derives from their inherent resilience? Indeed, a biological system is capable of fulfilling functions even in degraded modes, with possibly some performance loss indeed, but without collapsing. It can recover initial performance once nominal conditions are satisfied again, and it's able to perform corrections and auto-adaptation to maintain essential tasks for survival. And for example, if you catch a cold, your abilities may be reduced indeed, but in most cases, you can keep on living more or less normally and will recover. So the question is whether we can formalize the notion of resilience and connect this notion of resilience to the notion of robustness in statistics. To tackle this question, our fundamental stance is that degeneracy is key to resilience. So, degeneracy was introduced by biologists, namely Edelman, Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1972, and Galli. By and large, degeneracy can be seen as a kind of functional redundance, where different subsystems can achieve the same function, and each of these subsystems can compensate for failures of other subsystems. So a typical example of degeneracy is the following one. Amino acids are the building blocks of essential proteins. They are produced by RNA on the basis of messages included in portions of DNA. These messages consist of codons, and each codon is actually built from 3 molecules, the so-called nucleotides. There are 4 possible nucleotides and thence 64 possible combinations. And it turns out that there are 22 amino acids only. So our conclusion is that some codons correspond to the same amino acid. So our work hypotheses are degeneracy is key to resilience. I already mentioned that. And in reference to what I said at the beginning about statistical tests, we consider that statistical tests are fundamental components of a computational model of resilience. And we'll detail that now. So, regarding degeneracy. Degeneracy is mathematically formalized via the multiplicity principle, introduced by André Rossmann and Jean-Paul von Braumersch in this book here. The multiplicity principle is a categorical notion. And fortunately, the multiplicity principle simplifies drastically in preorders. For instance, a sufficient condition to show that a preorder satisfies the multiplicity principle is to find two subsets A and B that have the same suprema or least upper bounds, but that are not comparable through the preorder. So note that such a condition involves no material from category theory, and that's nice. So now, let's make the connection with statistical decision. To this end, consider the following detection problem. We assume that the observation is a sum of 3 terms: some non-deterministic signal of interest, either present or absent, some measurement noise, and some interference, independent of noise, with a non-distribution and for technical reasons with bounded amplitude. The detection problem is then to decide whether the signal of interest is present or not in additive interference and noise. With respect to this problem, consider the Niemann-Pearson tests and the RDT tests, and let's discuss their respective properties to intuitively end up with the idea that these two families of tests do satisfy the multiplicity principle. On the one hand, the Niemann-Pearson tests. They are likelihood ratio tests, and they are optimal in absence of interference. In addition, still in absence of interference, and when the sample size grows, they tend towards OA curve, that is, perfect tests. However, in case of interference, the Niemann-Pearson tests become unreliable because they cannot guarantee a specified probability of false alarm. In contrast, RDT tests are optimal with respect to a criterion based on the distance to a model, and they remain optimal in presence of interference with respect to this criterion. And why? Because they are essentially tailored to cope with interference. In this sense, the RDT tests are robust. Moreover, as Niemann-Pearson tests, they tend to become perfect when the sample size increases. We can then construct a pre-order that encompasses both robustness and the ability to detect. And with respect to this pre-order, the Niemann-Pearson tests and the RDT tests cannot be compared. They cannot be compared through this pre-order because of these differences framed in green here. Basically, Niemann-Pearson tests are better than RDT tests when there is no interference, and to the contrary, in presence of interference, RDT tests are better than Niemann-Pearson tests. In short, the Niemann-Pearson test and the RDT test cannot be compared under the same conditions. And this is due to the fact that they are actually optimal with respect to different criteria. But they are asymptotically perfect when they are used under the conditions for which they are optimal. Therefore, these two families do satisfy the multiplicity principle, and this drawing summarizes the result. So, to conclude, the approach proposed roots in sparsity and robust statistics before actually discarding any assumption on the signal of interest. And by interfacing category theory, statistical inference, and even biology, we have shown that Niemann-Pearson tests and RDT tests do achieve the multiplicity principle in the set of all tests. You'll find all the mathematical details in this paper. Our next objective is to enrich the theory by involving more elaborated statistical decision problems, with a particular focus on sequential testing. We also aim at designing resilient networks of sensors, where combining different types of sensors and tests satisfying the multiplicity principle could bring resilience to the overall system. And natural applications of this work are cybersecurity and monitoring in general. So thank you very much for watching the video, and thank you very much for your attention again. Bye.